For all the years that I was diagnosed with Crohn's, I knew that surgery was a possibility, and the entire time I would say I will do absolutely anything besides have surgery. I started having initial symptoms when I was around 10 or 11. It started just with some bloody diarrhea, and we went to see the doctor, and he recommended changing my diet, and we did that, and the symptoms really went away for a couple of years. Then when I was in 7th grade is when we started having a few more symptoms come back. And from that point, we went to see a specialist over at Duke University Medical Center, and he immediately admitted me to the hospital and after a colonoscopy, diagnosed me with Crohn's disease. Honestly, I don't remember what the doctor told me the first time. That those first few days in the hospital when I was 13 are a bit of a blur. I just remember being very sick and wondering when I would ever be able to even get out of the hospital. I was bedridden for at least the first several weeks while I was there. My parents were very strong. They were always with me. I think it was, for them, having a child diagnosed with anything was difficult. I think that they didn't understand what this meant at the time. I think they just knew what my symptoms were and how sick I had gotten very quickly. So I know at that point they started doing a lot of research on the disease, what exactly it meant, what the prognosis is for the future, and just ways to get me back to being healthy. After spending 25 days in the hospital, I was able to get around all right. I was still feeling very weak, but I started going back to school about a week or two after being released from the hospital. It was still difficult to make it through a full day. I often had to go home early just from feeling weak and tired. And I had to grow up a lot in those weeks afterwards to learn how to deal with what my body was going through, also in dealing with trying to maintain friendships and all of that when you're sick and not feeling like hanging out like you were previously. I think I had to grow up a lot in those following months and try to learn how to get on with life the best that you can. Following my diagnosis, I started going back to my dance classes just a few weeks after, and I can honestly say that dance helped save me during that time. It gave me something to strive after. It gave me a goal to be able to dance the same as I had before. It also gave me a group of friends who were very supportive during that time and helped me through it as I continued to get better. And it was difficult at times to stay on top of things, to make it to all the classes and just the physical demands of dancing. But it gave me something to push for. After being diagnosed with Crohn's disease, I had to learn to pay attention to my body. A lot of the symptoms revolve around having to go to the bathroom and having to go very fast. So I noticed anytime I went into a store or any place new, I always mapped out where the bathrooms were so I knew where they would be. I think also I just had to pay attention to if I was losing a lot of fluids and making sure to retain those. Also making sure that I was eating enough and getting enough nutrients. The year following that diagnosis was very difficult for me. All of my friends had sort of moved on with friendships at that point. It was like coming into a new school in the middle of the year, and I definitely had a difficult time adjusting to that. I can remember feeling very alone during that time and not feeling like I had any friends that I could turn to because obviously nobody could understand what I was going through. And often too tired to be able to go spend time with my friends like I would have liked to, and ended up spending a lot of time alone that year. After the first year of my diagnosis, which was more difficult, I did find a better balance in my life. I was taking the right supplements, the medication seemed to be working, and I was kept in remission for the most part for the next several years. I would about once a month have a flare-up for a couple of days that would lead to some painful symptoms. It would usually come along with bloody diarrhea and a lot of stomach pain. Also just being tired from your body dealing with these symptoms. I remember having to have times that I would have to very quickly get to a bathroom, and other times that I would just start crying from the amount of pain going on in my stomach. Thankfully, I had very good friends at this point who understood that I was going through a difficult time and were there to help if I needed to be driven home or, help me with getting medication, anything like that. Since I, from the very beginning, did not want to have surgery, I was willing to try pretty much any other option. And I feel like I tried a number of things. I did very specialized diets that were pretty much entirely natural foods and nothing else. And tried those for several weeks to the point that it just really didn't help me. And I also tried acupuncture for Crohn's before. And same sort of thing, I did it for several weeks to the point that you should start seeing some changes, and none of it ever made enough of an impact for me to continue doing it. I had good years during high school where I was mostly in remission. It was in 2004 when I went off to college that things flared up again, and this time did not go away. And it was about halfway through my first semester that I got really sick with a cold and was in bed for a couple of days. And I remember when I came out of that, my Crohn's symptoms had flared up. And at that point, they really didn't start going away, but continued to get worse as the semester progressed. And eventually, during my exams that winter, I was admitted back into the hospital and spent another 2 weeks there. I also was put on a high dose of steroids and started a new medication, Remicade, that was not available when I was in 8th grade. I was on the Remicade for about 4 years, and around that time, I was having difficulty keeping my symptoms at bay for the time period it's supposed to take. It's supposed to be 4 weeks at least between infusions, and I was not being able to make it that long without my symptoms causing a problem. And so at that point, my doctor decided to take me off the Remicade and move me to a different type of medication, Humira, which I could give myself as a weekly shot. After the Humira wasn't working as well for me, my doctor decided to move me over to a new drug called Tysabri, but there are some severe possible side effects with that were a concern. So I started on that for about 4 months, and he did another colonoscopy at that point and realized that my symptoms weren't getting any better, and so because of the severe side effects, he decided to go ahead and pull me off that drug. After I finished up with Tysabri, my doctor told me that my only option at that point was to go into surgery. He said that the other drugs that were out there were more than likely not going to help, and that really the only thing he had left to offer me was surgery. In my case, what I needed to have done was to have the complete removal of the colon and take what was left of the small intestine and form that into an ileostomy. Therefore, I would have to wear an ostomy bag that all of my waste would go into that and would be completely disconnected from the rest of the digestive tract. My reaction when I heard that I would need to have an ostomy bag was denial, really, at the point. I just felt that I wasn't that ill that I needed to have something like that done, And so I decided to stop all medication for the time while I tried to figure out what the next step would be, because for me, it just wasn't an option to have surgery. In the weeks after I went off all medication, I realized how severe my Crohn's disease really was. A lot of the other medications were keeping some other symptoms at bay, and I started having a lot of joint pain. I started having some arthritis creep in, and ended up having a lot of pain to the point that I could hardly get up off the couch. My ankles swelled up to the size of baseballs, and I could hardly move around. And it was at that point that I realized that this was more severe than I had originally admitted, and I knew that surgery was going to be the best option. My husband was actually on board with the surgery before I was. After my doctor told me, first off, that he didn't have any options for me besides the surgery, my husband said, let's go ahead and do it, but I wasn't ready to accept that yet. And as I learned more about the surgery and realized that it was going to happen for me, he was very supportive. He told me that he would be with me every step of the way, and he has been a great strength to me through this and has really helped me get through and still feel like myself through the whole thing. After my first surgery in 2012, when I was recovering from that, I decided that I wanted a goal to accomplish. And prior to that, I hadn't been able to do much exercise or running just because I was so tired. And I also had the issue of trying to hold things in when I was running. So with having the ostomy, I decided I wanted to go for a triathlon. And so I started training for that, and I did my first mini triathlon in October of 2012. It was exactly 5 months to the day from my surgery, and that was a great accomplishment for me. And following the triathlon, I got involved with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation's Team Challenge program, which is an endurance running program where you train with a group, raising money for Crohn's and colitis research and patient care, and training for a half marathon that you run together as a group. The second surgery that I had was a follow-up to my first. In the first scenario, they did leave a piece of my colon in the hopes that it might be able to be reconnected with the small intestine in the future. But since then, we've determined that I am not a candidate for that. And so leaving that part of the colon in can lead to complications in the future, possible risks of cancer. And so I just decided to go ahead and have the entire thing removed and make my ostomy officially permanent. I started writing The Stolen Colon a couple months before my surgery in May of 2012. The reason I started writing it was just as an outlet. I wanted a way to express myself. I think I also felt sort of alone in the whole thing and wanted to be able to reach out to people and find my place in it. I also thought that if I was going to be going through something difficult like this, that if I could even help one other person out there, that it might make it worth it. And in the long run, I definitely see that it has been. It's been, worth it to have people who have been going through a difficult time and being able to help them. And my dream someday would be able to continue to grow that, to be a part of this community of people who are living with these diseases, and to be able to help in the research, in the care of them, just in any way that I can. I'd love to be able to be involved and make a difference there. My husband and I are definitely looking forward to having kids someday. At this point, especially as I'm getting past these surgeries, we're looking at healing, having a little quieter time before moving on to that. But definitely someday I look forward to that. And thankfully, my doctors assured me that the surgeries won't be a hindrance to that.
you.